It's about love, not cash. Stealing money from the poor's a bit rash. Line your pockets, fill your tanks with your rockets. Look at it, we just can't stop it. Loving your neighbour with bombs is wrong. Loving your neighbour with bombs is wrong. Just don't become late. That's the only rule. Loving your neighbour with bombs is wrong. Loving your neighbour with bombs is wrong. All been going on way too long.
What we were already talking about, but then I'll just introduce you a little bit and just say that I'm here with Carolyn Green, who led a holotropic breathwork workshop this weekend in Whitehorse that I attended. So we're going to talk a lot about that, about what holotropic breathwork is and all of her experiences around that.
Right.
So, and like you were saying, you've been learning from Stan Grof, and many people who know about sort of psychedelic states of mind and things will know about Stan Grof because of his work with LSD in the past, but also his sort of pioneering of this holotropic breathwork.
Exactly.
And that was sort of your teacher.
Yes. So I trained I went through the Grof transpersonal training program, and I read everything he's, ever written. And every time I listen to him, there's just deep wisdom. And so I feel he's a very good guide for psychedelic medicines. And I think we were just getting into talking about how he doesn't distinguish between the holotropic state or the non-ordinary state that you would get into with a drug or something like breath, or even something that, without an entheogen. So it's like we're all one, we're all, as human beings, we have what's an ordinary state of consciousness, and we have the potential to go into a non-ordinary state.
Right.
And that's totally his terminology. And he has, he really was one of the first people who were really articulating how, even with his early LSD psychotherapy research, that it wasn't the drug that was producing the experiences that people were having. It was like we're wired, and we have everyday consciousness has an iron grip on us.
Right.
So we can do everything we need to do every day.
Yeah.
But what LSD did was just kind of move that to the back of our consciousness and allowed, was it the reducing valve? And so this deeper, non-ordinary consciousness was accessible to us. And then when in this non-ordinary state experience, that I guess the part two of that insight is, part one is like the drugs or the method of getting into a non-ordinary state.
Right,
that's not producing the experience.
Right.
It's not like it has effects, right? LSD is associated with strong visual hallucinations and others as well. But that's not what's the main experience is being driven by this inner healing mechanism, this unfolding of the deep psyche that occurs when you're in a non-ordinary state.
Right.
And that, what he means by holotropic or integration is really mind, body, spirit is trying to integrate and move towards a higher level of consciousness.
Right.
So we're expanding our capacity to have a greater, to have fewer restrictions to our consciousness, fewer blocks to that, and then more integration.
Right. And that seems like what a lot of the sort of new research is showing with some of these is that they're sort of lowering our guard mechanisms sort of in our mind that are sort of the ego, which is talked about a lot in these circles, is sort of just limited, pressed down, so it can't control all the thoughts and all the feelings as much, and things are allowed to sort of flow and open up.
Right.
So you're sort of saying that a lot of these substances or practices such as this breath work or even some of these yoga type of practices can lead to a very similar state where that's opening up these things, but they do also have their own little differences in these like you could say ayahuasca. Like for me, I've used psilocybin mushrooms and ayahuasca. I've tried both of them, and I did find them quite similar. They did give me a very similar state of mind, but there were just slight variations and differences in the feelings. So how do you sort of account for the little differences that maybe a holotropic breathwork session might have come up with some of these other things?
So, typically with holotropic breathwork, they're not as hallucinatory, right? And a lot of people just associate psychedelic medicines with hallucinations that aren't accessible usually in our healthy state of consciousness. We don't have access to those kind of hallucinations. And I mean, as you could tell, we're not going to talk about anybody's individual experience on Saturday, but clearly people had some strong inner visuals that were
for sure
very similar to what you could have with the psychedelic medicines. But it's the breath as an entheogen doesn't kind of activate those centers of the brain, that part of your sensory apparatus to that extent. So it's and everybody's physiology is different. Like even
that's part of it
with
too,
if you go back and read like Huxley's Doors of Perception, he wasn't a strong in his session. He wasn't a strong hallucinator on LSD, right? He was, because his dominant things were, he was more of kind of an ideas and auditory, and those were maybe his dominant. But however, his session when he did the Doors of Perception, he wasn't didn't get to that, I call it like a black light 60s poster.
And very
people are thinking,
bright colors.
Did it work? Like this, nothing happened because I didn't get to that place of, psychedelic visuals. And there can be an awful lot happening. And that is just, sometimes that can be like the psychedelic's working if you're seeing amazing things that you can't see in your ordinary state of consciousness. But there can be lots of other things that are going on. It's a very clear
thing you can point to and say, oh, look, it had this effect. It's very clear. It's something. Right. Yeah. Well, I wouldn't mind, maybe we can start, we won't get into other people's experience that were at this workshop, but I wouldn't mind talking about my own, and then we can sort of break down what the breath work sort of is and how it goes for people. So, because I think a lot of people probably listening don't know what holotropic breathwork is. So,
or they have misinformation about what they think it is. It's like this, but it's not really.
So I'll just start with sort of my perspective on going. It was my first time trying this. So to sort of summarize the experience, it's like we were in a small group and in a dark room, and we all lie down on mats and with blankets and things. And we had eye mask on to make it even more dark. And you had very cool, very loud music playing as well, which I would say was a very big part of the whole experience for sure.
Yeah.
And then, so the breathing is actually fairly simple as far as how you breathe. It's just, you have to breathe very, very strongly and consistently for as long as it takes, I suppose. I think.
Yeah, pretty
so
much.
When I did it, I laid down and I started breathing, and it doesn't really matter, mouth or nose, however you did it, and just, and you'd keep going in sort of a continuous practice where you just wouldn't leave any gaps. You just, as soon as you breathe out, you breathe in again and out and take fairly full breaths. So I did that for 15 minutes or so until, and you guys had said what might happen is you start constricting in the hands specifically. Like that was a common thing to have happen. And I think it seems like what's happening is you're sort of hyperventilating the body, which I've experienced before, and I've always gotten sort of tingling in my fingers and things. So I had a feeling I might have those claw hands going, and I definitely did. So that
may I just say at this point,
please,
because there's hyperventilation system, and there's people. Most of us have seen somebody who's been really frightened and freaked out and started hyperventilation.
Yeah,
and it looks like
it's different. It is different, isn't it?
And so it's different.
Yeah,
and so and some people just think that we're getting people to hyperventilate, and we're creating a hyperventilation system, which isn't syndrome, which isn't really
it's
like
not exactly
the healthiest thing. But this is, hyperventilation is usually short, shallow.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
This is deep, continuous, a little bit more rapid. And so even though that word hyperventilation is thrown around a lot,
Yeah.
we don't kind of encourage.
Yeah, I guess it
use that.
it is a different thing. It just has that similar effect with, I guess, has some sort of effect on the circulation of the body in some way, which creates, which in me, not everyone experienced this either, but for me, I definitely saw my hands were sort of in fists, and that's when I knew it was starting to work, because early on, I was in my head, I was thinking, I don't think this is working. I've been breathing for 10 minutes, I don't feel anything. And then because you guys had mentioned that, once I started feeling that, I thought, oh, okay, something is actually starting to take effect. And
may I just say about that, claw hands, or you can use, more pathological terms, but people can really freak out about that if they don't know about it beforehand.
Yeah. I think
some other breathing techniques are also like they are trying so hard to prevent that they're hardly getting the entheogenic effect of breath work. So Groff didn't worry too much about that. And he knew that from long experience that it often happens in first time, or the first few times of breath work, and then not at all.
Yeah.
And it seems to be part of, like, there's an energetic thing, there's a chemical thing, there's a brain thing, but it's almost like increasing your capacity to use breath as an entheogen in consciousness. So I know I like what one person said, their sitter, somebody who's sitting with them, and you hadn't mentioned that traded pairs.
Yeah, right. We did that too.
Somebody said, "Oh, you got those claw hands," and he said, "Oh, you mean the orbs of light?"
Oh yeah. That is in his mind.
So a lot of people will have that.
Yeah.
Whatever that energy, how they interpret it into the system.
Yeah.
So it's good not to pathologize it, but it can get very intense in your first time. I know it did for me. My first time was really was very intense, and you could have called us in to work with it, and we could all, we could have also we're offering that, to help people kind of loosen that up at the beginning. But some people just kind of take it and it just flows right into there.
Right.
There's things.
Yeah, I can mention that we were also partnered up, so that we had one person sitting with us to help us with anything if we needed a drink of water or any help to the washroom or anything like that. So we're in pairs that way. And then also you guys facilitators sort of checking on the group as well. Which made it feel very like you're very taken care of. And so you can, part of it is being able to relax enough to let go when you get to these states. And something you had mentioned before the workshop, in the sort of the talk beforehand, was that if you start to feel anything come up, try to intensify it. Try to really go into it. You're not trying to just sort of sit there as an observer, but you're like you had mentioned too, and everyone was giving sort of pads if they wanted to, because you encourage pounding on the floor if people were feeling that sort of rage or anger, those feelings come up in them. And I that's the first thing I did feel was this anger, this sort of feeling of rage. Was interesting. So maybe we can just talk about that a little bit. Why do you think that's such a common thing that people are experiencing?
Right. Well, because, there's a lot of social situations or even, within your closest circle where expressions of rage are not totally cool.
Right.
It's not
socially acceptable to
not socially acceptable
to express that.
Yeah.
And
so the like I spoke to my own experience. I didn't go through like post-traumatic stress, or like I didn't come as a patient into holotropic breathwork, even though I started off with the psychiatrist Ingrid Pacey I got, and who's famous now in BC for really leading the MAPS part of the BC part of those
MDMA
trials, MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, that's right.
And she had a practice that, a lot of people were pretty traumatized. But I had a friend who was seeing her who invited me, chickened out. I went. And my reason really for going was that I felt when I tried to take a deep breath, my breathing was tight, and I didn't have any way to kind of really get at that. It was like just, a breath workshop might be helping that. So this was like a lid on emotional and other experiences that I had gone through life. As I said, I was like, in my head, an academic, in my head, out in the world, and felt that I was like better than average with coping with whatever life threw at me.
Right.
Like life, there was lots of life happening all through my life, and I was, moving through it. But I didn't realize that I had a muscular armor that I had that was really keyed into my muscles that was, and I can see people with the breath too. It's like something uncomfortable or conflict comes up and they might be almost like holding their breath and clamping down muscularly.
Right. Yeah.
And then the feelings are coming up, the rage or the uncomfortableness isn't coming up. So I was, like many people do, just, kind of packing away undigested pieces of experiences that had been difficult emotions, and that were attached to difficult experiences. And when they were threatening to kind of arise, I was like clamping down on them. So the whole end of the spectrum, we'd rather not feel, that is rage, anger, fear, shame, uncomfortable, all kinds of irritations that we just kind of swallow or stuff
Right.
or clamp down on, can be kind of part of our deep psyche. And our psyche every day is like trying to clear us of this, like the pollution of modern or the intensity of life, right?
Right.
People die, things happen, and we have to carry on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we do. But that doesn't mean that that's not, that we don't carry with us. Like one of Stan's books is Healing Our Deepest Wounds. So we all have a wound of whatever depth. And then, some of them aren't our deepest, they're just there too.
Yeah.
And so those things are all things that are kind of constricting our consciousness from being totally expanded. So part of a bigger practice than a session, right, is like kind of that I learned, kind of early on, was that, hey, this is a way to like take out the trash, take out the psychic garbage and baggage. And if you can go through life not accumulating the digesting the feelings and the,
Like
the
let
stuff
them
that
out
happens, let them out, then that really leaves a lot more room for well-being and consciousness. You get your full emotional range. Like when something outrageous happens, you get to be outraged or whatever, right?
Right. Yeah.
You want to be fully accessible for joy, ecstasy, and, rage when it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Because that's how we're built. But if you can, but it's like in the moment. So you're not like carrying that rage from yesterday into this moment and tomorrow.
That's something
that
speaks to something I've been trying to do in recent years, really, is to try to be like, if I have to confront somebody because they're doing something upsetting, I want to be able to do that and then show them that it makes me angry in the moment and be angry, and then be able to just come back down afterward. Be able to go like express whatever it is that's you're feeling, and then come back down afterward. Yeah. And I think in the past, when I was younger, it was very hard to do that because I would get upset and then I would just feel it for the rest of the day. I would be stuck in this sort of like anxious sort of maybe anger or rage or and maybe because I didn't know how to express it properly. I didn't know how to get rid of it or to throw it out there just in some way. And it seems like, so we're talking about ordinary states of consciousness and these non-ordinary states. It seems like these non-ordinary states, or people might talk about them as like peak experiences or however you look at it, these are sort of useful in being able to feel these things that are that have been in you for a while. Right. And actually express them in a way. Right. And as you can see in the workshop, there's, and people sharing afterwards, we won't go into, like some people were really had past stuff come up and it was still being digested. Yeah. And they were still expressing it and needing to do that because that's what the inner healer served up something from the past and that was the inner healer knew better than whatever their, our everyday heads do, you know, about what would lead us to greater integration and greater expanded consciousness. And, people didn't necessarily want to go back to the crap. But a lot of times we're living life, kind of somebody told me once that,
you kind of believe in expressing and feelings and all that kind of thing. But I'm kind of a follower of who was Dirty Harry? That guy,
Clint Eastwood or something.
Clint Eastwood. He said, he said flat out, I'm really trying like to just not be controlled by emotions.
Right.
That I can be strong in the world without
Right.
being controlled by emotions. I don't want to like be soft.
Right.
And that's all
Yeah.
good too. You want to be strong, a Clint Eastwood in the world, and deal with,
Yeah.
things that you have to deal with. But in non-ordinary states, it's a particularly rich, time to be out of your everyday life, so that rage could be expressed without hurting anybody.
Right.
And the thing is, a lot of times it's not only the most recent thing. If you're really clear, it's just the recent thing. But for a lot of us with baggage, and this is like most people on the planet, right?
Yeah.
It goes, these things all get connected together, right? So Stan talks about condensed system of experience. So the part of the birth process, when you're actually going through the birth canal, is when it's like the experience is often, the best analogy is like a cat being squeezed through a toothpaste tube. So cats are the archetype of biological fury. You can only imagine how, furious and fighting and everything a cat would be, like being squeezed through a toothpaste tube. So they're enraged, and then and outraged, and they're moving out fast. So when you're going through that, though, as you're about to be born, and it's like the contractions and the choking that happens and everything going through that, oxygen's being cut off. It's like something's trying to kill you. And if you're in that life-threatening death, near-death situation, which is birth for most of us, then it's like every time in your life that you were pushed too far and you just had to push back. And that's part of your biology, as like it's just, if something is trying to like choke the life out of you, you will tend to be fighting back.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other situations that aren't birth that can be like that,
But everyone has that birth experience, and so
yeah, that's right. But they get linked. That's the point. Condensed system of experience. That if you were pushed too far last week, that often gets linked back to even like that imprint. Your birth imprint is like, it's an early imprint on this psyche. You might have 50,000 lifetimes before. I don't know. But this one, right. You have your personal biography, and then you have your own personal birth, and those things become a part of your unconscious.
Right.
Then there's the collective unconsciousness tapping you into all of the species and beyond our species, right? That's another thing. You can even tap right into there with rage sometimes, but at least these things all get like linked together. So, we all know people who are really angry, and maybe they don't think they are, but you're always kind of like, you just don't want them to blow up.
Yeah, for sure. I've known a few people like that.
Yeah,
sure.
And then, so the idea is that that's probably not just the last thing you said to them. Right?
Right. It's been building, it's linked to all these other things. Yeah,
it's linked to every time they've been pushed too far, and, could be a really rough kind of birth experience. But the the things is that can be bullying experiences, real trauma, in a lot of people's lives that get, not layered or linked into that. So when you go into a rage and when you really feel that rage in a holotropic session with breath, whether you got there with breath or something else, it's digesting, because you're really feeling the emotion sometimes even more strongly than you could at the initial time. And so that's fully feeling it and fully being able to express it. Sometimes people really need to have that full-bodied physical expression, and that is what, when it gets right as strong as it can get, then it kind of releases the other way. And at least you've kind of siphoned out a big chunk of this undigested rage. And it's like a lot of people are really afraid to really go to the depths of
to
their
see
rage.
you don't know what's going to come up when you go to that place.
Yeah. And a lot of people are afraid, are afraid of really opening the lid on their fear. I mean, the whole kind of thing in the West has been like, don't open that Pandora's box. Psychotherapy, because you could be crazy, or you could let the crazies out, and then you'll live crazy.
Fears. Yeah, people definitely talk about that a lot. When I talk to people about psychedelic thing, that's one of the main things that comes up is like, I don't want to go crazy. I don't want to go somewhere I can't come back from, kind of thing. Like, for sure.
But that is like not like we were just talking with Ingrid Pacey, about how, she's never heard of a case of anybody going psychotic, having a psychotic break in breathwork.
Right.
But people, you can do it unskillfully.
Yeah, and especially when you're doing it in these environments where you have people who are trained and who know what's going on and who can give you all that proper information. Yeah. So if you're clenching, you don't have to freak out about it. You can stay calm.
One of the main things, actually, of the risks in psychedelic medicine in general is like fear, is freaking out.
Yeah, right.
And so the more so that's why Stan, like the talk that I give at the beginning and, the night before, I give people the information so they know the whole map. Yeah. And they know what can come up, because, you're going to be saying, when you get into a crunchy place, you're going to be saying, I don't know if this is such a good idea,
Yeah, right.
Which it's holding it in the idea that this is like arising to leave. This is, taking that charge out of my psyche.
Yeah.
And with all the tens and thousands of people who have done this, that this is, the experience is that this is this healing mechanism in the deep psyche is always trying to move you towards wholeness. So Stan uses the analogy of like, a plant growing towards the sun, or a sunflower it moves its face to follow the sun. So our deep psyche is like, it's an inborn mechanism that it's moving towards wholeness, which is greater consciousness, greater integration.
So it's about allowing it to do that, getting out of the way.
Yeah, we're cooperating. We're actively cooperating because we have a will. Right. We have a will, and so we can try to run, and in our life, and a lot of times that would take the form of addictive behaviors or substances.
Yeah, sure.
So we're trying to, not feel painful experiences.
Right. Yeah.
And not kind of face some difficult truths maybe. But it's like there is underneath that thirst for wholeness. This is Christina's Groff's big thing. And this really applies to an addiction, kind of paradigm, that, we can try to find wholeness in things that are never going to achieve that.
All right.
Right. But these, the psychedelic medicines, and including holotropic breathwork, are a legitimate way to achieve greater integration and expand consciousness in a way that's healthy, so that you have greater capacity to live your life fully with, life is just going to keep, spares no one. We're all going to die. And
life is traumatic.
People are going to die around us, and stuff's going to happen. Yeah. Right? That's life. Then you die. Right? But, and maybe go on, it seems, maybe. And, but that's all that's going to happen. And it's you really do have a choice of whether you're going to try to clear your stuff and live fully and in a clear way. Like for me, this is all about, I'm really, my highest value is like clear consciousness. So I don't want to have I want to live from a consciousness where I'm not so responsive, because I'm carrying my baggage in front of me. Right? And projecting that onto people in the world. Say,
projecting it on everything around you.
All the baggage.
That you're having negative experiences all day because you're just trapped in whatever mindset you're in.
That lens, lens on the world, right? Yeah. And not that there's not bad things going on in the world. Truly. For sure. Truly bad things happening that, it's right. And we are human, and we make mistakes and fail and hurt the people around us. And, that is also humbling, but it's part of the human experience, right?
Yeah. But so a lot of this is about sort of accepting those things and being able to move forward, being able to move through them. So going back to the experience I had.
The forgiveness piece is like all those files are there, right? And they can come up in a session.
Yeah.
And when you really are at peace with them, it's like your peace and others' pieces. It's like does come down to forgiveness. However you wanna, whatever word or description you want to have for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is often what it comes down to.
Yeah.
To be able to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I felt anger right away, and my fists were clenched. My mouth started becoming twisted as well, and I was very aware that if anyone was looking at me at the moment, I was going to look very strange. It felt weird, so it was a kind of a weird feeling, right, in the state initially, and then I felt very angry, and I could feel the mind trying to make sense of why I felt so angry. And so I was sort of telling myself different stories as why I might be feeling this way. And one of the first ones was like, I think I'm angry because I can't move my arms. So I want to be able to move. This is bullshit. I want to move my fists. I'm stuck. And that was maybe, a little bit of it. But then, I remembered what you guys had talked about early on. That was when you feel something, like feed it, like go into it, feed it more. So I started feeling like, okay, yeah, I am angry. Yeah, I am really angry. And then very quickly, the anger changed into total sadness. I became very, very sad. And like I had told the group afterward, I ended up crying through a lot of this experience. And I don't cry very often. So I had cried more in that say hour and a half than I had in years. And it felt really good. It felt really good to do so. Even as it was happening, I was feeling very sad, but I was also feeling relieved that I was able to feel that. And yeah, it was powerful. It was really powerful. And there was no visual hallucinations, nothing like that. It didn't feel very psychedelic as far as what I was used to, But I've never used MDMA, but to me it actually felt like what I've heard MDMA described as. Because people have told me that MDMA doesn't give you those sort of hallucination things, but it allows you to sort of feel things in a deeper way a little bit. And so that's what it felt like for me.
So a couple things, like one of the, just like on a technical note or whatever. So like MDMA is an empathogen. It's not strictly, it's different within the family of psychedelic medicines. It's there, but it, in removing the fear factor, then the feelings that are there waiting to be released, that
maybe have been suppressed.
That have been, the same paradigm is applying. They come up, and if for all those first responders that were in the trials, right? Those were, those were the things that were there. And for a lot of us, we don't know if that's going to be those kind of, if fear, sadness, or anger, or whatever is gonna come up, but it's whatever's activated. And sometimes I like this phrase that is like, what is it? The hungriest dogs get out of the basement first. That this is how the inner healing mechanism works, is that in one way, it's either like, it's not all taking out the baggage, right?
Right.
The other part of it is aligning with, your source energy, whatever you want to call that, or infinite wisdom, whatever you want, So there's that, so some people who have experiences totally on the transpersonal realm, that might be ecstasy and bliss, or, from life, but I mean, physically, if people are just having an experience on the physical level, it can be really energetic and positive, overwhelming positive feelings, things like that. People are always typically okay with things that are on the positive side of the scale, but it also makes sense because that's being served up, because that's the fastest, like most efficient way to bring you to greater wholeness. And so
that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think it can be broken down into two parts. Either you're aligning with source energy, and then it's like almost like that alignment is giving a big influx of positive energy and positive experiences and feelings in those. And sometimes that kind of burns away dark clouds. So it's not like,
yeah.
thinking we have to, go to breathwork or psychedelic medicines, just that it's like you have a whole lifetime of accumulated baggage, and it's all you're going to have to
right.
wring it all out and agony and, and often it is, your experience is like, a lot of people have that, is like holding on to that stuff is actually worse. And, you're feeling below the surface, it's like doesn't feel great.
Mm-hmm.
And people are afraid of pain and that kind of anticipation, or I like to reframe it as excitement before a session, right? A lot of people are thinking, oh God, I don't know what's going to come up,
Mm-hmm.
it could be bad. I know there's bad stuff.
Yeah. For sure. Everyone,
it's all going to come. Yeah. It's coming up to that. Right. And then, but often when you're in an experience, and that when the emotions are flowing and things are really kind of clearing out and cleaning out or purging, an emotional purge or a physical purge,
mm-hmm.
it feels good in a certain way, not in that, what is it, sadomasochistic way. It feels like kind of good in that it's leaving. It's at least that energy is not stuck.
Yeah, and I would say when I was just personally experiencing
mm-hmm.
that, it wasn't it. Like I said, it felt good. It was just, it was there and it was pretty intense, but it wasn't scary. No. And really too, I wasn't exactly like, it wasn't like I was upset about, I wasn't even really going into my own personal past and things. It wasn't about that. It was really, I was thinking about a lot of sort of say this work that I'm doing, trying to share this mm-hmm. psychedelic medicine and that it can help people. I was thinking a lot about a lot of the people in my community who I've met who are suffering a lot, and how we could help them so much more than we are. And that made me really sad that there's so many people who are really suffering out there who just don't have access to some of these things that are so beneficial. Like that was something that came up. One thing I think I want to mention is like you were talking about before with someone who was sort of identifying with like Clint Eastwood or something like that. This very stoic kind of figure who was. And that's, I used to feel like that a bit. I remember writing an essay about, I think I titled it like "Emotions Are Weakness" or something like that. And I wrote all about this. And
you expressed it.
I had to think about it. Because I thought about sort of like young children who get really angry really quickly and how like that's an immature sort of thing. And I thought about that. And I've identified before as being sort of a stoic individual. In this, and there's people who maybe think like maybe hear stuff like this and think, well, that's just BS. They're just feeding their own whatever like emotional roller coaster, and they're just enjoying it. And we don't really have to go into that. We don't all have that. We don't all have trauma and stuff like that. And I want to bring up a kind of a silly example. It just was something I was thinking about as you were talking about. So my two dogs that you met, I have Penny and Teddy. And they're both from the same litter. It's kind of a weird thing to explain. So there were two mothers that both had 6 pups. And one of the mothers was also the mother of the other mother.
Okay, yeah.
So one mother was a grandmother to half the litter. And so they were in a shelter, and the shelter got all 12 of the pups all mixed up. And they were all in they didn't have a huge area for them. And so there's a lot of little young pups, all like around the same age, all together. And so Teddy, my dog Teddy, was one of the bigger ones in the litter. And Penny was one of the sort of runts, one of the smaller ones. And what we've noticed with Penny, we've had them now 3 years. Teddy is very confident, very like he's a very social dog. Go up to anyone and sit and meet all the new people that come over, or meet other dogs too. Penny has this like ingrained like something in her that she is very fearful. She even when we go to pick her up, sometimes she pees herself. She gets so nervous that she pees herself. And we've been trying to help her with this, trying to give her some confidence, trying to, but it seems like it's something very ingrained. And I just have a feeling it was something that happened early on in that litter, where her being one of the smaller pups, probably getting pushed out of the way a lot, something like that. And it's now very much in her psyche. Even as a dog, I can see it. It's very clear. She's got this complex or something. And that really highlighted for me just the dog's experience that these things do really stick with us. Things that happen early on in our lives, it's just part of the human experience that when we have, say, traumatic things happen, they are ingrained in us. And it seems like we were able to find these ways to help move on from some of these things. And I don't know if I should give Penny ayahuasca or something, but or maybe try to guide her in holotropic breathing. I don't know if I could do that, but
it's kind of hard. But so this is like true. I mean, you can see it in people as well, right? You just kind of know.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to a massage therapist that it's if somebody's been whacked across the face like really hard as a child. Hopefully this doesn't happen anymore, but it certainly certainly did. But they can see it like he was really sad himself that he could identify when people had this kind of syndrome that somebody hauled off and whacked them, and you know how awful that is. But we're imprinted in all kinds of ways, positive and negative, and psychedelic medicines are really like a reset.
Right.
So because a lot of that programming, we need to do a lot of things on automatic to survive our environments, and we can't keep all that conscious in our everyday.
Right.
Like, almost so much. Like you and I are just concentrating on this conversation, and everything else is on automatic.
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah.
And it's like that all the time, every day, and we have our own ways of doing things. So, but this also provides a reset. What the animal kind of version of reset? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because they, you just, it's hard to explain it to them.
Yeah. Maybe they don't have.
But they're trainable.
Yeah, for sure.
So you train a lot, and you can see them. They're training you, and
you're, definitely.
But you have that kind of chance to desensitize, or maybe it's the best thing.
Or to just structure things intentionally in a way to change things, change habits, and change the pathways. So there's a whole mountain of great things that you can do in ordinary state of consciousness, without psychedelic medicines. So there's, all the healing arts and the hack your psychology, kind of things. Yeah. People are that's like a new sort of frontier people are really into these days. Is biohacking or consciousness hacking and things.
So that's all working, a lot of it on the level of ordinary consciousness. Like if you do something, like every day for 30 days, and that's going to be a new pattern.
Right.
So you can say this pattern's clearly limiting me. I know maybe it came from this, or I don't know where it came from. Right. But I'm going to install a new pattern. I'm going to have a new way of doing things.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it seems like some of these peak experiences or non-ordinary states can also do that. And there's been research in some of the psychedelics that they've found are able to sort of to reset these pathways or neural pathways, and talk about neurogenesis, the creation of new cells and things. Yeah. And that, we're just at the retreat.
Pretty exciting, eh?
Yeah, it is. We were talking, some of us at the retreat were talking about Paul Stamets, and
I know that name.
He's very into researching mushrooms, and not just the psychedelic mushrooms, but all mushrooms.
He's a mushroom guy.
Yeah, he's like a mycologist. And we were just talking about the story that he told. It was a very powerful story where when he was a kid, he had a really bad stutter. He had a terrible stutter. And then he climbed up this tree during this thunderstorm, and he took a lot of psilocybin mushrooms. So he was having this experience. He's never taken them before, and he took kind of too many. So he was very much in this, but he started having this mantra. He just kept repeating, "Stop stuttering now. Stop stuttering now." And he did that all night. And the next day, he found he wasn't stuttering anymore. And that was something he'd been doing for years and years. And it was something he was able to change something in his mind to fix that problem.
He was having a deep conversation with his deep psyche.
Yeah. That's one way to look at it. Yeah.
Because this is, it's kind of an artificial separation anyway. Like there's always some things, kind of things, it's not so airtight.
Right. Well, and that I was talking to some people who, when talking about these things, we often talk about them like they're separate, and that maybe they're not. So maybe they're more. Maybe it's part of my deep psyche is here right now, and
exactly.
I'm expressing it right now, whatever that is. It's a hard thing to really get into, talking about non-dualism is how some people describe it. That even language itself, we're putting limitations on these things and separating things, and that maybe that's not the case.
But that's the way I think a lot of things. There's this consciousness that's, you know, even watching us as our small I self, right?
Sure.
Like I'm a stutterer. But then there's a part that's looking at, you know.
Yeah, the observer.
It's not the stutterer.
Yeah,
that's
right.
observing the stuttering or the dilemma or whatever.
That you're not stuttering
that
in
big
your mind when you're
yeah.
talking or whatever.
Yeah, that big consciousness. So that's where I think we can all end up without, you know, maybe it's not so hard, you know, that then the next generations, you know, people will have an expanded consciousness and they'll, you know, more and more people will be living from an enlightened state of that consciousness. I think
that's a vision I hope to see one day, is just more people just like having these conversations, talking about it more, being more open to these kind of ideas. And part of that I think is doing podcasts like these, sharing the language, sharing how we're talking about these things is helpful as well, just with people getting on board.
The human experience around it, because we're all like, you know, maybe a few people on your podcast are completely enlightened beings, but the rest of us are just bumbling along trying to
I haven't interviewed
figure this out.
Ramdas yet, or
try Graf. No, he's pretty. He's really worth listening to. Like, if you're into this stuff, I would recommend anyone to even go back to things like his early psychedelic psychotherapy. You know, so, as I was saying, somebody who was, you know, a really good scholar, and somebody who early on had powerful experiences that moved him into a holotropic paradigm versus, you know, out of the Western mindset, and has kept it up for like 60 years. He's you know, he's a really good guide. Yeah, he would be. And articulate about it in many books. And he's still going strong with, he had a course last year on, you know, the way of the psychonaut. And so he's still very much accessible to people. So not giving up at like something like 87. So in fact, he still seems to be ready to kind of go into another resurgence, because, you know, a lot of the people who did, you know, this Rick Doblin, who started MAPS, he learned all this stuff early in his life from Stan, before things were even shut down. He was planning to be a psychedelic psychotherapist, and now he's getting to kind of lead the way. He doesn't think that's going to be part of his career path, but at least he's going to have blazed the trail. Yeah, you know,
he'll
and
set it up for others.
Without that effort, like we wouldn't be at where we're at with you know, like getting things through the FDA right now. And Ingrid Pacey followed kind of Groff, and they're both kind of giants in the Mithoffers. Yeah, you know, for sure. So, and they're, you know, with their experience bringing it into, you know, lots. I mean, his early experiences was with the population in Europe after Second World War, and, you know, the subsequent generations have had more and more experience with people who have been less traumatized. Right. And haven't, you know, lived in a war zone. For significant parts of their life, you know. So they all have lots to offer, that I really feel that, you know, as you were saying, the world could change very quickly with the, you know, medical cannabis, recreational cannabis being legalized. Some of the psychedelic medicines are going through, and it's the legitimate, you know, a lot of people are, you know, willing to give up the what is it, stigma or whatever? Or it's gaining credibility.
It is. I know. I talk to a lot of people who are sort of maybe in my parents' generation, who now, even now with marijuana becoming legal, even that alone, it's just something that they are able to accept now as something real, like legitimate. That it's this must have legitimate benefit. Then people are actually looking at legalizing it and things, and it's just yeah, it's a necessary thing. Like people, I think when things are illegal, not everyone is going to want to look into all these illegal things, and they don't have time, and it just seems like, and there's so much stigma with an illegal substance that it's not.
Right.
That's why holotropic breathwork is actually pretty cool to share with people, because it's legal. All we're doing with holotropic breathwork is breathing. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, but you're also setting up an environment to create the state
Set
as
and
well.
setting.
Yeah.
So one of the things about holotropic breathwork is Stan, who had done all that psychedelic research, all those early researchers knew set and setting is far more important than the drug itself, because, when they were just kind of putting things into punch bowls and people had no idea what was happening to them, it was just so awful.
Yeah,
for
there
them.
would be a totally different thing when you don't know what to expect.
Completely traumatized, and
yeah.
And there was just a lot of crap. And they were always like set, setting. And then, so this is like just set and setting in breath.
Yeah.
But you can learn set and setting by even just attending one holotropic breathwork session.
Yeah.
Learning about it. It's kind of good training in how to hold space. I hate that word term anymore,
Yeah.
But to be there for somebody else's session.
Yeah.
And in a way that's helpful and not harmful to them, and really creating that safety, you can step over it more easily with a lot of psychedelic medicines. If you ingest something, you're gonna have that door open, whether you're feeling safe or not, and whether you're welcoming what's coming up or not.
Yeah.
And whether you understand what, like I love Rick Doblin once he was saying, like a lot of people don't realize that the experiences they're having are their own psyches unfolding for them, So there's a lot of like, I don't know, people are like doing things, and it's like that gives them a ticket to a movie.
Yeah, like you're watching something else that's not you.
Yeah, so there's all this body of really rich knowledge that even a lot of people who kind of get it about that it's a medicine don't really, kind of fully understand how it's a medicine for the psyche, how it works, how these different, states are going across all the psychedelic medicines. And even, like they're going to be coming up in sun dancing and, a lot of yoga practices, or people spontaneously go into them if they're there's the whole spiritual emergence, where that kind of streaming of consciousness going into non-ordinary states becomes a crisis for them. And we're handling that with suppression, medical suppression. And we don't really have the set and setting to be able to handle them in a way that, allows people to take out a lot of the trash and become grounded, and, that they are safe in an ordinary state of consciousness.
Yeah.
A return to an ordinary state of consciousness.
Yeah. Even just to give an example, we're talking about set and setting. So like, what is that? Even I thought at this workshop, this breath work, even if I wasn't doing the breathing, if I was just sitting with an eye mask or laying down in the darkness with this powerful sort of trance-inducing music sort of playing, I'm sure I would have, I would probably be able to deal with some things would just come up naturally, even without the added breath work, the physiology stuff happening.
Right.
Just because that setting is so powerful. It's
exactly.
And the safety net around you too, just that as being part of it. Most people I've talked to who've had negative experiences with psychedelics, I'll just go, okay, well, what happened? Where did you take it? Well, some guy I met at a party gave it to me. And I was 18 and I didn't know what to expect. And there was all those people around me I didn't know, and I freaked out. Yeah. And it's like, well, yeah, that's not a good place to do that for the first time, or,
Yeah. I think a lot of festivals, might be okay, but
yeah,
but sometimes not.
You're really careful.
Something really,
The nice thing about this breath work is that you're sort of in control to an extent. Like, you can, like, I started calming down after the initial sort of feelings, and then I started breathing again to get back into the state again. But I could have just chose not to, and I could have just laid there and let it calm down, and I would have been fine. And the whole time too, while experiencing all the emotions and things, my sort of my mind, my ego or whatever it is, was still there, still just like
Yep.
witnessing and talking to myself about what was going on. And yeah, it definitely, you're present the whole time. I think it's a great way to share these sort of experiences with people who may be on the more skeptical side of, or fearful side of these more powerful substances that really do lock you into this state, and you have to be ready for that. And
you're going to be in a state for hours, you know, if you ingest something.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have been wise if you had breathed yourself into that angry place and then decided, I'm out of here, right? That's the point where you can have activated something. And if you go out into the world with that active, you might be dangerous behind the wheel of a vehicle.
That makes sense to me because of afterward, because I started with the anger, but then I got so sad for a while that the rest of that day, if I just started thinking about being sad again, I was near tears. Like I was opened up to that feeling. I could feel it. So I could see that, if you just stopped at the anger and then you just kind of had that sort of flowing in you a bit, that could come out in other ways. So.
And but sadness is a good one. Like often it kind of leaks out after a session, whatever your session is, you know, it's the kind of thing that, and that's good, you know, but we're really the integration piece. A lot of people skip over some of the basics of that, which is whatever you've activated, you get as much of that, cleared during your session, because there's less, you know, that's going to be kind of lingering in your field. And just having a nice clean session will bring you back. You could be tired, you could be a little spacey, but you're going to, but with food and connecting with people, talking, you know, afterwards, and spending a little time, even drawing, that kind of thing, expressing it more, then you're going to be a lot safer. And sessions that, you know, and some of that set and setting and the way of doing it, like that's also the psychotherapy part, that you have people who are there to support whatever comes up. It's not psychotherapy as we think of it in time of talking to somebody for, you know, whatever,
sitting down
and dissecting, analyzing it and figuring it all out. You know? But it's just like having all that abundant support, and then that people are well grounded and able to drive. And even though things, you know, you get the ripples over the week, you basically have your feet on the ground. And able to handle interactions with people without having like almost like your whole, instead of your baggage, like this holotropic state being between you and whatever you're trying to do in your life. So some people are kind of reckless, and they're being open, and they're thinking like an enlightened state would be like almost always being non-ordinary and kind of
like you'd want that at all times or something.
that would be and that's why you know, one of Stan's greatest things he says is like ordinary states are very useful for landing aircraft. You really we're not going to demonize ordinary state of mind, even demonizing your ego, your identity, your avatar, whatever. We need to be a person in the world to get around.
I'm a big believer in that as well. We gotta like give credit to the fact that sometimes you need to have coffee in your system, not ayahuasca. You need to have something that's going to help you fix your car or whatever it is that you have to do, because we live here. This is 90% of what we do is right here. So
that's the non-ordinary. We have a special ceremony. We have a separate container for that. We make it as safe as possible, and we do that work there, and then we return back. And sure, there's a lot of integration things, but I just saw a great big long list of people, somebody had about things that you can do to integrate after a session. And I was like, you know, really, if you just make sure have a stable, ordinary, boring, you know, get through your day and spend some time getting really your feet on the ground again. And then when you're very, you know, kind of stable, and then look at if you're not able to really be grounded in an everyday life after a few days or soon after, you know, if you've been 3 or 4 days at it, you know, it might take you a few days before you're really very ordinary again. But if you're not, then you might need to do some work, like go back into a session. Like holotropic breathwork can be really useful after doing psychedelic medicines, just for that, whatever's active there, just continuing to process it until it's clear.
Right.
You're clear of that, right? You can do it as a psychedelic medicine. You can do it before as somebody who's like maybe thinking they'd like some of the benefits without the risks of the drugs, or whatever, all those things. But in the integration, people, skipping over that, getting your just feet on the ground. So if people would be starting to do a lot of things that are taking them out there when they're still very active, like it can backfire. I mean, yoga or floating or fasting or all kinds of things, they all have their place, really powerful healing kind of things. But if they're taking you out and you need to be grounded after a session, don't do those things until you're grounded, and then you're gently going back. So there's a lot of wisdom. I think as a whole psychedelic community, we're just starting to learn.
Yeah. Well, there can be
better.
A lot of pressure, I think. You go into one of these states and you come up with some of these conclusions that are very inspiring, and sort of, even me thinking about these people that I feel like, I could do more. I could help more people. Like I should go out there and just do more. And then I get back home and I go, oh man, I got to do the dishes and I got to do this. And you got to kind of start just baseline, like get your house in order,
laundry,
do your things, and then maybe do more, but it can be hard. I think it can be kind of, I don't know what the word is, but to go from such an inspired peak sort of mindset where you're really envisioning how your life could be or whatever it is, to then go back to the ordinary and have to sort of, I like to look at some of these experiences like they can help you map out your vision for the future a bit. They can help you steer your ship a little, and then you can kind of see that light in the distance that, I want to be there eventually. I want to get to this point. But then you work day to day to get there. You sort of have to go back to the ordinary. You don't just manifest everything through these states.
Yeah. So Stans has a lot to say about that. And sometimes we don't have to work too hard to shift. Like if there's something that is, if somebody's an angry person and they let go of a lot of anger, and, new vistas are kind of opening up, then, sometimes the stuff that has gone and you're kind of reset, it's not limiting you. So there's the feeling, people can get that I don't have the limits I had before. But then there's all the technology of the ordinary, right? Like if you feel really inspired to become a pilot, or to become a healer of a certain thing, then you're not going to learn that in an alternate state. You might get a lot of things that are going to change the way you're being in your life. It's your being, right? And your consciousness is going to be shifted, but you still have to learn those skills and take the technologies for ordinary state time and really apply them, perfect them to have that power in real life. So that's what I want. I want to access the power within, and then have the power to, live my life as fully as I'm inspired to, as I can. That's
what it's about, right? Is taking it back to your actual everyday, day-to-day life and integrating it somehow that's meaningful day to day.
But you can't bypass like wanting to fly in a plane. You really can't skip over the skills, that you have to do. The training and the skills that you have to do. Yeah. And, but even some of that disappointment of kind of coming down, it might speak to the poverty in somebody's life, that their life isn't really that great. Right? And it hasn't been that clear to them, the ways that it isn't a great environment or a great, path for them that they're on. And those are hard decisions.
That
to make to, like I'm on a path that's not really right for me, and letting that kind of settle and making those subtle moves to get it. So there's a lot, there is a lot of room for bringing in the counseling, integration, community kind of skills to support people as they move something that's really authentically a better path for them.
You had mentioned, I think maybe it was the talk the night before the workshop about just sort of giving people a bit of just a sort of warning, or just I don't know what the word is, but to say, maybe don't go out and break up with someone right after this happens, or maybe don't make any big changes to your life right away. Like let it settle a little bit first. Yeah.
But people do that.
Yeah. People do.
And even after a meditation or a yoga retreat or breath work, all kinds of sessions, they think this isn't right and I gotta take the big step right now. And then if you're still very open and unsettled, it can really cause a lot of unnecessary chaos in your life.
Yeah. Even like definitely if people are on a substance or something during the experience, definitely don't make any phone calls or make any big plans during. You want to take that time afterward, at the very least, take a little bit of time.
Weeks, like and really check it out with somebody. And I've told this to people.
Maybe get a second opinion.
I've told this to people, like I always really, part of the Groff program, right, is to really make sure people have the information on after the workshop, right, and enforce that. But people still do things like break up from a place of childish or adolescent rebellion energy is kind of coming through, and it gets projected onto their partner, and they're off, and then then realizing in the fullness of a couple of weeks, no. Let's get back together. You go back and think, okay. So, but don't blame the breath work, really.
Would you mind if I asked you about some of the experiences you've had with holotropic breathwork? Like
so many.
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously had very many experiences with it at this point. Maybe I'm just curious about some of the other experiences one can have in this state.
Right. So you kind of covered up a lot of the emotional, and yours didn't have a strong narrative, or you don't have to give it. Like sometimes, even if it's on the physical level, you can have energy streaming things, or the body detoxing and, kind of reordering. And we don't like to put any strong frameworks of understanding. So on the physical plane, I really avoid people from applying anything too much on even if it's a Chinese medicine or a chakra system kind of knowledge frame and understanding it on that kind of level. But I've certainly had the experience of working through a lot of pressures and things. The body holds memory and holds things, but without having a specific incidents or things, like I've had my body be completely energized and have a solid column of gold light from, top to crown, which is, people would call it a Kundalini kind of thing, but it's just like feeling that alignment with, source energy just from your core and radiating outward. That was really great. That's, you don't get to walk around like that every day, but you kind of see your whole body differently when that, when you have those kind of purely physical experiences and the toxins and the pressures in your body. Like I don't have that muscular armor. I mean, I can sometimes catch myself if something's really, really intense.
Sure.
Kind of doing that kind of thing.
Right.
But my body is much more like my breathing's relaxed. I'm breathing. Sometimes I even notice, like if it's an intense situation, that like I'm breathing and people stop breathing, It's been a huge benefit just on the physical level. So my own, biography, which I thought was, not too bad when I thought my wounds were all pretty manageable, but, I love one of your podcasts where you were kind of laughing on people think they don't need healing. Right? Because I related so much. Because when I went in, I was not only pretty okay, I was like better than okay.
I'm good.
Better than okay. I'm good. I'm good. And then there was a lot of things from my early childhood, like even to the level of being a pissed off toddler and like maybe at toilet training not liking that, like at that level of, you can see kids like go through this, you're kind of being pushed into this and and just being unhappy about early parenting, being a a child without unlimited control over the universe. You know?
Right.
So going through massive of that, all my family stuff, all kinds of, even my parents' stuff, you know, like I could see how their stuff came into my experience and how I'd like almost like imbibed that with, you know, that was part of my inheritance.
Yeah.
Like with mother's milk, I'd gotten, you know, like the death of they lost their first child and I was the next.
Oh, wow.
And that was something I knew about my history, but I didn't get the full embodied understanding and feelings of how that had played out in my early childhood. On, you know, like there's lots of stuff.
I've heard people talk about that we sort of have this idea that a baby is like this clean slate, but it's not necessarily. We come in with things from our parents, and whether it's just physically passed on in our DNA or something, or it's just in how they interact with us when we're young and we take things on, or even in the womb that we hear things and you know, experience things. Yeah,
Stan says how ridiculous it is that we think that you're a tabula rasa when you're born. This is the whole myth in psychiatry, and then all of a sudden you develop an exquisite, you know, the nuances of mothering of a good breast or a bad breast, or you know, like rejection, you know, like all these early mothering things are going to have, but birth nothing, right? You know, in the womb nothing, anything before that nothing, right? So, but I think psychology and psychiatry is starting to realize that that's that we might not have as much myelin as we do as adults, but like even in breath work. And talking like the next stage of like is birth. So I was stuck in the womb before I was an cesarean section. I was probably stuck too long before I was extracted, and that was a really life-threatening situation for me. And it's something that it was like medicalized, like a lot of anesthetic. And even in my breathwork sessions, I've gone back and at a cellular level been blowing off that kind of anesthetic to the point where people could smell the chemicals of that coming, you know, around me. So they say, but I know for sure that I was having those kind of states of my consciousness being dragged into unconsciousness and trying to fight off that anesthetic. Because early anesthetic or any kind of surgery can have a lingering dampening effect on your psyche. So my whole birth was a lot. It became for me in my breathwork journey like a portal where I, you know, of pain or whatever, that I kind of entered the non-ordinary realms almost through that, because there was a lot of like, you know, head crushing. That's like if you're stuck with your head in a pelvis, like the second stage of birth, you know, Stan really goes, he's got chapters of each one of these stages of birth.
Really?
You know? Yeah, the realms of the human unconscious and other books he can kind of, those are the template that all this stuff gets linked to. And when you're stuck, that's like the root of all victimization and depression. Going through the birth canal, the root of all aggression and sadomasochistic violence. You know?
It's funny. I guess it makes sense if we're going back to deal with Pat. This is as far back as we can really go, to, you know, physically.
But when you do that, then everything else kind of loosens up and flies away.
Because, right, that makes sense. It's hard to explain exactly, but I
like
see.
if somebody has a choking experience with, you know, cords around their, on their neck going, passing through the birth canal, then every like choking experience they have, even if they choke on food or they're in play, you know, they might get strangled or, you know, something at, you know, in an accident, that all gets kind of linked together.
That's funny. I'm someone who definitely doesn't like getting choked. I've had people grab me by the neck before and I get heightened quickly. Like I don't like that. And I don't know why. I was a C-section as well. And I've never really, I've definitely never done any work in this way, you know, to go that far back and try to think about any of that stuff. Well,
it'll just come up if it needs to.
Yeah, I guess.
And because mine was, you know, had that dampening effect on my psyche, it was great. And I knew that about my, and I never would have sought out an experience, but these kind of things are great because, you know, I was conscious enough, but to get more, you know, expand my consciousness, clearing that template and the stuff it was stuck to. That was really awesome. And then there's the whole transpersonal realm, you know, having experiences that people think of as being, you know, kind of psychedelic experiences, having experiences of being in the cosmos, you know, like in just being kind of free floating with stars and nebula.
Really? So
beyond that kind of that
experiences like that
Yeah.
with this breathing.
Yeah, the whole transpersonal realm. Like if people do breath work or psychedelics enough, they'll get most people just don't keep having the same experiences, you know, all the time, right? Your very next one, you could be in a transpersonal. That means just something that's outside of the experience of in your life.
Yeah,
your
could
body,
be an out of body sort of thing. Or...
Yeah, and yeah, so I've had experiences of you know, kind of feeling like I was the ocean, you know, like ocean consciousness, and even like kind of feeling things being dumped into, you know, like identifying that so much, identifying with a whole, like the Pacific Ocean.
Wow,
that was pretty.
That's incredible.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah,
people really can't believe the experiences that you can have with breath, music, a little bit of time, a little bit of knowledge.
Yeah.
And these are all things that really make me. I've had the experience, probably one of the most powerful is, it just kind of started off very simply that I was watching a hand that was drawing on a piece of paper, right? Simple drawing. And the question was like, what's drawing? And then in my consciousness, I turned around and saw all the machinery of consciousness behind being human.
Oh, wow.
In that most, you know, like a 5-MeO type experience. It was just like all the whole thing.
Yeah, all the cogs and gears behind the product.
And you can't even put that into words.
No. Yeah.
You know, so that was
subconscious.
Amazing. Yeah. Like my father passed last year, which is never an easy thing, you know, to have a parent pass in your life. But in one of my sessions just before that, I had seen him walking down a country road with his mother. And it just gave me so much. It was a very small little piece of a session, but it gave me so much solace.
Yeah.
As he passed and after in the grieving period. So, I mean, I could just go on and on.
Yeah.
Like all the things I feel that are I most value in my life about being able to do or be, you know, are all I can really trace back to this work.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been at it for 25 years, and I work with Ingrid Pacey, you know, like, you know, Stan Groff, and been able to offer it and see it in so many people that I really know and trust the terrain.
Yeah.
So
it's really incredible.
It's
just
incredible
to hear experiences like that you can have from really something that seems so simple. It seems like such a simple thing to do, but it's amazing.
If I just might say, it's really interesting it's really easy to screw up a simple setting to make it unsafe or pull people out of process.
Yeah.
So we're really, you know, creating it so you're not disempowering people and not, as a facilitator, putting your stuff into their space.
Yeah, that was one thing that I actually meant to bring that up that you had talked about before we started, was to tell everyone. And it was a really interesting thing that to try to interfere as little as possible with people. So even if it looks like the person you're sitting for is having a terrible time, if they're crying and they're hitting things and moving around, don't just let them go through that until they ask for help.
Right.
But until they ask, you don't want to interfere as much as you can.
Yeah, because it's really can be very annoying and disruptive. Like I've had, you know, also some bad facilitators. Somebody trained by Groff can make mistakes, but I've also tried a few different, seeing what people are up to, you know.
Right, yeah.
And it is, you know, Groff really knows what he's doing. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that you're doing in ordinary state of consciousness. So this is not like an expensive yoga class. or it's, like people think
Yeah.
I do pranayama or Wim Hof or, like it's not,
right, other
it's
breathing.
not that. It's tripping on air, right? It's really, and that's not easy to do without that facilitation, without that set and setting and container for the work. People think maybe they could watch a video and, try it at home. And
right.
you probably, if you'd done that route, it's unlikely you would have had the experience you had on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And that was a conclusion I came to after going through the experience, was
Right.
that likely it would be pretty difficult to recreate the experience by myself.
Mhm.
It would be pretty hard.
Right.
Yeah, for a lot of reasons. I don't have the playlist you had. It was really great music.
Well, it's not really the playlist is just matching a trajectory of how things go with breath.
It seemed like you set it
Right?
up very purposefully with the tempos of the songs and things like that as well. Yeah.
Nothing's for me. Like, this is whole training certified. If I didn't do it exactly the way Groff does it, I could be called out for not doing holotropic breathwork trademark. Like, the trademark isn't like we, think that it's possible to, have the regulate breath or anything like that, right? Or try to franchise or something like that. It's really, Groff was saying most people think that they could facilitate this after experiencing it a couple of times.
Right.
And he finds that it takes at least 2 years before somebody really knows what they're doing and could do it, like at a starting entry level of practice. He never felt that he could do it. And I should mention Christina, like they were, the real, she was really a good match, the male and female pair, just to have that. She added the music, for example, and designed, the trajectory, all that kind of thing was worked out. Before that in psychedelic medicines, they were using an approach that was trying to evoke things. So if somebody was not touching their sadness, right, then they'd come up with a sad music set, and then that be helpful to kind of go into that sadness. But the Groffs really are, did a lot of work that you need that support kind of going in, and then it's like music to breathe by and like start off the journey with, very rich. So if we listen to it, your brain is it's entrancing, and it's like not going to be focusing as much on, that maybe your arm is hurting because you're, you're holding orbs of light. Right?
yeah.
And then there's a long stretch where it's like journey work. And if you can just kind of get on that, we're really looking for long pieces. And all those sets are ones that, like it's like a community of people, and there's a whole week-long module on doing, how to learn how to create that kind of thing, and the breathers are all the facilitators are all like swapping music. Oh, this is going to be great for the third hour, this is great, for the second hour. So, it's hard to take credit because there's the musicians, that they're just totally channeling spirit and, the beyond.
Yeah.
So anyway, and sometimes the interesting thing about the music is sometimes people disappear. The music, I've had people say, it was interesting, you got us going and then shut off the music after the first 15 minutes or something, right?
Yeah.
And it was just, they were gone. So gone.
Yeah.
That
time.
Next 2 hours of music did not.
Yeah, it didn't even register
for them. So it's not all the music and it's not all the breath.
Yeah.
These are just kind of, even the drugs, everything's just kind of tricks to get you into a non-ordinary state of consciousness for really healing.
And a lot of it was what you said beforehand too, to let people know. Yeah, I found myself remembering a bunch of things that you had said while in the experience, that it just, because you have so much experience, so you know how to prepare people for it.
Right.
Just,
Yeah. Totally Groff stripped it. But this is, I give this talk a lot, right? Like I've been facilitating for over 15 years, and everybody's skeptical.
Yeah.
I think at some level, without exception.
Sure. I was definitely.
Most, like I'm going to try this, but fully kind of skeptical.
Mhm.
And I talk into that because people really don't have anything to relate it to.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of times if you listen to a TED Talk, you kind of know
You have
something.
you get an idea, but it's hard to know
Yeah.
what it's going to feel like. It's
Yeah.
it's
Even
totally different.
people who've done psychedelics
Mhm.
don't believe that they can have a really or even more. People have told me, that was a more significant experience for me than my ayahuasca or whatever.
Yeah, no, it
psychedelic
was pretty clear just listening to the group talk about their experiences afterward that a lot of people had pretty profound things going on.
Right.
And definitely, it was very similar to like I would say when I did ayahuasca, we did a sharing circle at the end of that as well to hear people's experiences. This was very similar reports of what was going on, like very at that level,
Right.
Yeah.
It's not the drug. It's that. it's that everybody, like, you don't want to put it on to even a workshop or a drug, the thing is really owning the power within and realizing that that's a part of your inheritance as a human being.
Yeah, that we have that
capability. And Stan would often say, like, he looked at all these he got into it and became fascinated in how all these different cultures, that humanity has been using non-ordinary states until the West got kind of a little bit too much on the science track. Got a little bit swung out being rational.
Mm-hmm.
But they have science, and that's also useful. Mm-hmm. But now we can bring it East and West together.
Yeah, it seems like that's what's the next sort of step here, right? Is like integrating those two mindsets, those cultures together. And I feel like it's exciting to imagine what that might look like in years to come when these very scientific, rational mindsets are merged with sort of the Eastern or shamanic or whatever you want to say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think, it's like an evolutionary leap in consciousness for humans that we need just in time, because things aren't going too well.
Seems like it. Yeah.
It should be like moving towards a rebirthing on a planetary level.
Yeah.
But the thing that's also distinctive is we don't get as much into the ceremonial aspect that is how many different cultural traditions create their safety and setting, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's different, right? Like, Aya has one and yoga has one, like there's all these different kind of things. But Stan and Christina very deliberately took that cultural and ceremonial piece out because that makes it accessible to people from whatever tradition. You don't have to be a yogi. You don't have to be a shaman, or a Amazonian, and, not to diss anybody's kind of culture, but it's not necessary at this to have a basic anyone who's not suffering from some kind of physical condition. I'm not even suffering. Somebody pregnant, this probably isn't a great thing, but you can have heart disease or retinal detachment or some of these things. You could really harm on the physical plane.
That you wouldn't want to do breath work. If you were,
You don't want to do harm on the physical plane.
Yeah.
Right? And there's some people who are in really extreme states of consciousness, like that you wouldn't want. They need a bigger container than you can do in a small kind of workshop. So if people are already streaming consciousness and we need to build residential facilities where people can have an experience over a few days or longer, so that they have a lot of times the similar care that you would take for a longer period of time, because you'd have to have a renewal of the supporters, right? And rest in the environment and all those kind of things. But that's all dealing with spiritual emergence. And we do that really badly in the West right now, like with drugs.
For sure.
Or really stigmatizing people. But, that's also something Stan and Christina really worked at, is starting in a spiritual emergence network so people had the option to not, just go the Western medicine route. And but it's still not enough for a lot of people who need that. A bigger container, basically.
Right. Yeah. I see.
And then what I see in the psychedelic world, in kind of general, there's a bit of a concern, is that, sometimes if people need to get grounded and they go into the psychedelic medicine, there's a lot of people who can become worse off, that have trouble integrating. And if you're having trouble integrating, you do more and more, and then that is worse and worse.
Yeah,
that we really have to look at what is really necessary. So I think if somebody's if it's already, if somebody's already streaming consciousness, they don't need an extra entheogen or.
What do you mean when you say streaming consciousness?
I mean, somebody is in a non-ordinary state when they're trying to interact as if they're an ordinary.
I see.
Ordinary, right? Like if you've had an experience with somebody who's, what is in their consciousness is more vivid than what's in their surroundings or their interaction with you on an extreme level.
Right.
That's, without putting a lot of pathological terms on it, that's somebody who doesn't need to do more to stream, to have.
They need to do more on the integration side.
Yeah, they need to be in a container where it can stream until what's activated has run its course. And then with that care that's like even fasting or becoming dehydrated or, not having that opportunity to rest and be safe can make things worse.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks to a few things. One thing that I've always wanted to present and an idea I've wanted to talk about is that you don't want to be chasing the dragon all the time. That it's like you want to be able to. The integration is like the right word. It's just integration is that word is used so much that it kind of loses its meaning almost in these psychedelic talks. But it's just like you do want to focus on your actual life and your everyday consciousness. You really want to bring it back to that. And what turned me off of a lot of people who talked about these subjects was that they were so far in the other direction. They were so far and it seemed like they would be putting on a show because they felt that's what they should do, but it's not. Like they would, like people say, for instance, talking about how we're all one, and we'd be. There are people who are trying to embody that at all times, that we're all one and everything is love and yada yada, but they wouldn't talk about how angry they would get or something. It would all. And it would seem untrue. It would seem like, but I think it comes from a good place. It comes from a place of trying to take what they saw there and put it out there.
Yeah.
But that it maybe is just not. It's like the hippie mentality that too far in the hippie side.
But like most people have those kind of unity experience at some point, if in breathwork or any other psychedelic medicines, right? Like you have that feeling or deep knowing that at some level we're all connected and we're all at one.
For sure.
And then it's not a matter, of trying to walk around as one body in the world, right?
Yeah.
We need our boundaries. We need our space. We have our own. We're all I think it's a better idea is we're all manifestations of that one source.
Yeah.
Energy.
Yeah.
Right. But we really do have to.
But we're all so separate.
We're all at that level, and the physical, this time space reality. Yeah, we all are separate.
Yeah,
and dissolving boundaries is not the way to go. Acting like they're not boundaries.
Yeah.
Is not the way to go.
Yeah, you go so far down these sort of philosophical, spiritual ideas, this idea that our reality could be like an illusion or something, and that seems possible. It seems like maybe that's true, but it doesn't seem useful to live as if that's true at all times. Yeah, because this table is there, and it's I am here, and it's just becomes a bit too much for me when it becomes about trying to live in those states at all times.
Yeah, I really see there's a lot of that, and I don't think it's like kind of holding that vision of how things really are in some kind of, there's truth in all that in that kind of level, and but the power is really in being able to be powerful in the life, like be able to see somebody when they're really being a jerk, and see that even that, kind of behavior or whatever, right? That still that they're still a jewel in the heart of the lotus,
right?
And that they have the capacity of being more than how they're showing up in the moment, because it's not like having unrealistic expectations of yourself that it's going to be easy to forgive people who are being, idiots.
Yeah.
And really hurting you in some physical, financial, way in your life, like that's not the real world is one dimension that we have this opportunity to be fully ourselves and value our avatar and value the breaths that we have in this avatar, and live life. Stan is also great on this, like the Cosmic Game is a great read, and he's like, why would God want to like create all this and manifest all this? And it's like, his great lines about like it's only in this dimension like you can really appreciate a juicy steak or make love or fly over the landscape, work out, like it's really useful having this body, mind, spirit, and being able to kind of play it out over 100 years on the planet. Yeah, so like totally go for it, and
right,
and enjoy it, and don't try to like disown your humanity or your negate your being.
And I like what you said, that having an experience that we're all connected on a deeper level and we're all sort of one or whatever, that can help you just see that in other people and feel connected to other people who are, either they're suffering or they're being a jerk or whatever it is, and not just taking that at just face value, but being able to see deeper and connect with people on a deeper level and things like that. And that's totally useful in everyday life. It's really great to be able to not get escalated when someone else is escalated, or being able to, for sure. That's helped me in some of the work that I've done just practically day to day here, is working with people who are struggling in different ways, and being able to be that calm person who's not going to get triggered and get upset if they're upset, and being able to,
And you work with people who are like in recovery from having
sort of. I work with sort of
alcohol
like in some way. I work for the outreach van in Whitehorse. Been working with them for a while, so that's working with sort of people, often drug users or people who have housing issues and things like that. But also youth who are struggling with different things as well. Yeah.
And again, a lot of them, they're very kind of lovable at a certain level, and they're real annoying.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the other thing, is you see people who are being a jerk sometimes, or maybe 90% of the time they're a jerk, but then you go, oh, but I also really like that one thing about you, though. You're really funny. When you, people all have that. They all have that sort of, there's something in people that you can really connect with and really enjoy too, even if a lot of the time they are upset, or they're whatever they're going through, dealing with things, but you can see that.
Yeah, I would really want for a lot of them just to have, we could be doing so much better, in terms of the extreme mental states that they are encountering and acting out from, and not like, kind of having, a real kind of clear path to get where they probably really need to be or want to be.
I think
at some level.
I would love to share more of these experiences with people, these non-ordinary states where people can connect to something deeper. It's often it's often the sort of band-aids for bullet wounds type of thing. Is we're really giving people very surface level treatments for things that are really deep core problems, and it's hard to do that. It's hard to
I have a lot of heart for that too, that I hope that we can create that, like even I was talking with somebody down in the US who works with a lot of youth, and it's like, we can build something bigger like Miracles on the Mats. So once people have a certain distance from using something addictively, that this is not for early detox. right. But somebody who's really giving it has a shot,
has some space,
has some shots, has some support. Like with Gabor Mate, has really kind of shown that ayahuasca can be that for a lot of people. I was not very impressed that Health Canada shut that down after the research. That was pretty irrational,
Yeah, well, fear
based on not based on the science.
Yeah.
But I still hope it's coming, that people can have the opportunity to really heal some of the deeper wounds, because otherwise it's just too hard not to medicate or or even
or feed the addictions more.
Or somebody was kind of saying that they were doing a lot of reckless things, and that was really their death path, whatever, their suicide route. Through death. I mean, like drugs and reckless abandon. Treating your life as if it's not worth anything is like that suicide route that some people are on.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll do this until.
Yeah, I've met people like that for sure, just pushing the limits until they can't anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah, which is a waste of a life.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But part of the. Yeah, but a lot. I don't think that a lot of them see that there is a path that in recovery, where they're free of like maybe the personal pain that drives them to use again.
It's hard, even if some of these things became legal to use. I mean, holotropic breathwork is already a legal thing to do to get to these states, but some of these other things will say, if they started to become more a part of our culture, I think it'll end up being where it's not just about having these experiences, but then being able, back to integration again, but being able to go back into an environment that's not going to directly feed back into the same habits again. Like just go back into the, it'll have to be more of a ingrained approach. Like going through these peak experiences, having these things happen, like releasing some of this stuff, and talking about resetting pathways in the brain and things as well.
Yeah,
like something like Iboga that has been renowned for helping people with heroin addiction. They can go in, become non-physically addicted, not mentally addicted anymore, but it's really important that they don't go back right into the same community where all their friends are using and all this and this. They have to. We have to structure communities in a way too that people have a chance to go down different paths too. Like it's tough. It's a tough.
Iboga is really I mean, that's the one that can really unhook people from the opioid.
Which is like a crisis right now. So
so hopefully that will be something that becomes
more legal.
Possible, because I mean, there's more. Well, right now I think it's trying to have a compelling case.
Yeah. Right.
And holotropic breathwork isn't going to be the first line choice for somebody who's trying to get out of a opioid. It's not going to unhook them from that.
Yeah, right.
And even with some alcohol addictions or whatever, like I would having a stronger kind of purge or reset. This is more subtle. But then even on those trajectories, like after a certain point where you don't maybe need to use as heavy, there's a place for doing holotropic breathwork can, I think, be really useful.
Yeah.
And there's a whole module on the holotropic paradigm applied to addiction. And so lots of people are, it's an alternative to the mainstream route, but a lot of people are using that are using breathwork in the long recovery phase.
That's what I was just about to say. I could see it definitely being useful in that, in sort of just like, however you want to put it, keeping the mind right or whatever, keeping things aligned afterward, without having to go into a 8-hour whatever mushroom experience or something,
Yeah.
you know, just being
Yeah.
able to do this.
And and having it like being aligned, and also life keeps like there's more trash that comes in all the time. You keeping clear.
Yeah.
That's why
Not getting bogged down
Yeah.
more and more. Yeah.
like we look for magic bullets, or maybe the one trip,
Mhm.
to Peru,
Yeah.
whatever, right? But there's, I think, a need for more depth work than a lot of people don't really realize the benefits that they can have over time with doing depth work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you could tell people how they could get in touch with
Okay,
you or
yeah.
find out about some of the workshops you're leading. I mean,
Right.
It sounds like you're based out of mainly around the Vancouver area or
Yeah,
Vancouver
so I
Island.
live in the Cowichan Valley in Vancouver Island. And so but I come to places like Whitehorse. So I do host workshops. We're kind of coming to the end of the fall, spring. In the summer, it's more retreats. And,
Oh, yeah.
like people are outdoors a lot. But there's a workshop in Vancouver at the end of June. So my website is thesecretofbreath.com. And another great opportunity coming up in the fall is the Psychedelic Psychotherapy
Right.
Forum. It's in Victoria, Langford. And we're going to have a post-conference holotropic breath workshop. A lot of the psychedelic sciences ones are having companion holotropic breath workshops because it's legal and
Right.
that there are a
Yeah.
lot of like-minded people around. But it's a great networking. And there's somebody who's been doing holotropic breath work since the old early Groff days at Esalen, who's coming up, and she's going to, and it's going to kind of blend into a piece that they do that's like Occupy Yourself, which is also using dance and just Gestalt in different ways.
Cool.
It's like integration, but it's like really,
Sounds fun.
going from extraordinary and non-ordinary states to being extraordinary in ordinary states.
Okay.
So that's a post-conference course. It's really great coming up. We're looking at maybe doing going down to a retreat next in Nicaragua. We're coming back here
Oh, wow.
to Whitehorse in late October or early November. And but Vancouver, Victoria, and Nanaimo, I've done like probably a dozen workshops in that area this year so far. So after, things will calm down a bit in the summer, maybe doing like Hornby Island. We did that last summer, something like that. And then it'll start up again for another fall, winter, spring season.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So if anyone wanted to get in touch with you about any of this stuff, your website is probably the way to go.
Yeah. And there's a Facebook, there's a meetup,
Yeah.
Carolyn Green at shaw.ca.
Okay.
But probably the website is
Yeah.
where you can see the schedule and there's more information on breathwork.
Cool. Well, that's
Yeah.
exciting. You're coming back to Whitehorse.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll get to try it again.
Yeah, it was too good not to do it again. It
Yeah.
really worked out
We had
well.
a pretty
This work
good turnout
this
too.
weekend.
Lots of people were there, so
Yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I enjoyed speaking to you. Thanks a lot
Yes.
for joining me today.
Well, thank
It's been a lot of
you
fun.
for this opportunity.
Went by like that.
Oh, good. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty easy.
Yeah.
We could probably talk another 5 hours.
I know.
but
It's easy to keep going with a lot of this stuff.